2 pages long, and it is the staff memo for the prior piece of legislation that was presented to City Council. To give you just a briefing on the changes to the legislation, it requires the registration of garage, yard, and porch sales. It requires 14 days advance notice of the event, so you must register 14 days prior to the event. You can hold 3 events per calendar year. The 3 events per calendar year are to be held for no more than a total of 3 consecutive days each time, and it requires the city manager or designee to determine the necessity of hiring an off-duty police officer based on a number of factors if it happens to go over 3. It requires that 3 garage, yard, or porch sales on a street within a development or area requires parties to provide additional information to determine the number, location, and location of the garage sales. No fees will be charged for the issuance of registration. So those are the main points within the legislation. The legislation is actually in Exhibit B that was last presented to City Council and which is currently on the table at this time. Based on some discussions with Council, I was asked to modify the legislation, which clarifies that the third applicant is responsible for the cost associated with garage sales should we determine that a police officer is needed. So that is listed in C and D and highlighted in section C and D. I was also asked to talk with our law director regarding whether we could hold the HOA legally responsible. And Exhibit D, which is 2 pages, basically states what the law director came back and said is that the city has no legal authority that would allow the city to impose upon the HOA the legal obligation. You suggest that the HOA is not one conducting the yard sales. So the HOA cannot be responsible for the fees or held responsible for the fees. Exhibit E is the information that Councilmember Shoup sent out to everybody regarding something to think about with regards to garage sales, and I'm sure she will go into that. And then Exhibit E, or what's that exhibit? Exhibit F is something that the new community development director put together as far, and city planner, as far as scenarios that could play into it and possibly what they're proposing, and they can talk about that as well. With that being said, we are here to get more input from City Council to determine how you would like us to approach it so that we can draft legislation in that manner.
Ms. Shoup, would you like that?
Well, I guess my whole concern is, as I read into the legislation, how it says, and I'm looking at Exhibit C, 2 pages, Section C, the third applicant and each additional applicant assumes equal responsibility for associated with conducting the garage sale, yard sale, porch sale in accordance with the law. It also then we're going to say that up in D, that the applicant must provide, everybody else is somewhere in here it says that, I lost my point about there's so many pages, but I guess is if we're asking the the third person, I'm thinking this now, we get reach number 3, and we're asking the third person, that they are responsible for getting the name and address of other applicants. Why would not the other applicants have to just come in and give their own? Why are we putting that burden on that third person? The applicant must further provide the following: name, address, contact information of each property owner who is participating in the sale or event, and documentation showing the location of all properties participating in the event. How can you do, I mean, I guess I don't understand the logic behind that. That makes, and then if somebody has a garage sale and doesn't tell this person, who's responsible for the violation of the ordinance and punishable by $500? So that's my question, you know, when I look at this.
Lori?
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what Christine said by saying that I think we're talking about two separate things here. We're talking about garage sales that are independent of one another, and then we're talking about events that are organized by a community for more than 2 or 3 people to be involved in. And for me, I'd like to see those two pieces separated out. What constitutes an event? And I think if we describe that 3 or more garage sales within a certain area provides the concept of an event, and then from that point on, an event has a different set of rules than your average garage sale that happens, you know. And by that, what you're assuming is that these people are getting together. I mean, by holding the applicants accountable, Christine, you're assuming that these people are aware and in cahoots and are communicating with each other and making a decision to do this together for some gain or purpose of their own, which is probably to draw more people in from the public to look through their merchandise. So my point is that I feel like we're talking about 2 very different things, and we share that the community, the administration holds the cards because they know how many applicants they're getting. So when they hit number 3, that's when they come up and say, hey, wait a minute, this sounds more like a community event, and determines whether or not there's an organization piece to it. My other point is that when any time there's an application for anything that allows for something, why the administration doesn't have the authority just to say no to number 4 or number 3. Say no unless they are registering as an event, and then they go under a whole different set of criteria as an event. Hope that makes sense.
Jim?
You're on mute, Jim.
Jim, go ahead.
You're on.
Yes.
Okay. You know, I guess I'm not in favor of the third person has to pay. And I guess if I look at this, the one thing is you have to evaluate the need for food. Look, we've had this issue in 2 separate locations with too many people having their garage sales at one time. Or do we probably do something there? Yes, that would be a good. I think the way I look at it is, if we're going to cover the cost, we charge them a full fee of, like was proposed, $10 for 1, 2, 3, is the fee that was called that, but the first going to be the person, they also based with, garage sale. So it's something that the finance firm, it was, if we look at 191 garage sale, it would be anywhere between 38 and that, which is cover most of the costs. We're not positive. It's 3 to 4 days we need to controlling the those are my thoughts.
All right, thank you. Tom?
I guess my question is more to Lori. Are you suggesting that possibly people who just have one garage sale don't have to register or pay a fee, but an organized garage sale, say more than 3 or 4, maybe they should be registered and have to pay a fee to cover the cost of the police?
Well, no, I'm suggesting that everybody register. Everybody has to register for a garage sale. I think that was already in our ordinance, and I'm not opposed to that at all. What I'm suggesting is that we have a separate pathway for like individuals who are registering for a garage sale, and as opposed to groups that are registering for a garage sale. And the red flag to our administration that it's a group. Remember, we have a 14-day window. So people have to apply 14 days prior. So that gives the administration some time to respond before the event or the garage sale is taking place. And my suggestion is that once there are 3 or more in a specific area that come into the administration, they're now red flag that, hey, this is more than just a random garage sale in the community. This is possibly some type of event. And so I'm just suggesting that we have registering for a garage sale, and then we have the red flag that says, hey, wait a minute, maybe we've got an event going on, and we flag that as an event. And then there's a criteria or a set of standards for the event. My suggestion is that there are 2 areas in our community that we know of that could do something like this. One is Liberty Greens and one is Heisley Park. I think it's unfair to expect the residents on Skinner and Sanford and all of that to cough up this 10 or 20 bucks, which by the way will go up once that's not enough to cover the cost of the officer. So that's not a fixed thing, hey, it's gonna be 10 years forever. We're gonna someday say, hey, 10 bucks wasn't enough, because, and the cost will start going up. And it's just another fee for our residents to pay. It's for them to do something on their private property that should have no effect on the community at large. It shouldn't. It should just be a minor thing. But these events that are being held in Heisley Park and Liberty Greens are events. And I understand that they're not homeowners association authorized events. These are individuals, neighborhoods, or community members coming together to say, hey, let's all do this together, advertise it, and we're going to draw a bigger crowd in by having 10 on the street than we are by just having a lone garage sale by myself.
So could possibly their fee be based on the number of people involved in a garage sale if it's going to be an event? Say you've got 4 garage sales, so it's to cover the cost of police, it's 25 bucks for a permit.
I think that that's what the legislation that stands is suggesting, is that once we hit that number 3, that all of a sudden there's a cost associated, not so much for getting the permit to have the sale, but to address all the other fees associated with it. If you got to put out cones or signs, or you need a police officer on staff. I just think it's responsible. Listen, the homeowners associations at Liberty Greens and Heisley Park cannot be happy when congestion is in their community because of something that the residents or community members have come together to do. So they should have some vested interest in how these things unfold in their areas. So I'm just suggesting that the rest of the community shouldn't have to pay a fee so that these other associations can have big events, because they're going to draw in more money than I can probably draw in on my house on Skinner when it's just me. So that's just one thing. The other thing I noted is when, and I think it was Jim or asked for data, and I noticed that there were, in 2019, there were 8 complaints. So we had a 3-day event. I think there was over 90 homes involved overlapping, and there were only 3 calls to our police department. Or no, I take that back, not 3, 8 calls to our police department. I'm not sure, but I just don't see those 8 calls as this big problem. Why can't our police respond to 8 calls, and they would have to move block driveways and things like that? That would be something that I would assume that our police could respond to. I just didn't see the numbers of complaints so high that it was a big problem of sorts that came out. 8 calls to the police in 2019, and there were over 90 sales that overlapped each other, and 8 calls. How burdensome was that for our department to go there?
And the 8, 4 were one year and 4 were the other. It was only, Heisey Park had 4, Button Avenue had 2, Liberty Greens had 2 in 2019, and then Heisey Park only had 4 police reports in 2018. So it really was only 4 per year.
So that even the residents aren't complaining that badly about this, even though we had 90 overlapping. So I just think this is just kind of overkill.
So you're suggesting maybe we don't need police there?
Well, I'm not suggesting that we do or don't need a police. What I'm suggesting is there's a difference between a garage sale in your yard and holding an event in your community, and that we haven't pulled that out in this legislation that's in front of us. We haven't tweaked that out in this legislation in front of us. And I'm also saying that if you're the lone person on Skinner Avenue that doesn't have the benefit of a homeowners association and a neighborhood kind of coming togetherness, why should you have to pay the $10 registration fee?
I agree.
And I would also add that that fee, you know, let's say later it's more and more and more. Now that fee keeps going up and up and up, and pretty soon it's $25 to have a garage sale at your house. My experience with garage sales is they're a lot of hard work. They're not very much money, lucrative money. I think we've done a good job, and I credit Doug, I believe, for this, of not allowing people to do garage sales. So many, you know, our legislation now prevents somebody from having a perpetual, always, everyday garage sale in their yard. So I think the legislation we have is good. And I also don't understand why when that 4th application comes in, our administration can't just say, no, there's already 3 over there, it's too congested, we can't allow that. Why can't we say no? Or is there no point to registering? Does that give, and if that's the case, then maybe that needs to be added to the legislation, that the administration has the opportunity to say. They have the right to say no because of the number of events.
Jim?
Sorry. Jim?
Okay, and the only thing I want to say is that, you know, in the community, you pay for things, and you may not receive the benefits right off the bat, or not at all. I mean, we have clean issues at Seabrook, over by, the north end, on North Street. I mean, we spent $1.5 million, and that money has been coming out of, pots that everyone has contributed to. The people on Charlotte Street aren't really getting a lot out of that, but when we are helping fellow community members, we're probably say that. Now, we might have a different problem with trees, something like that, with no, all of this. There's just a lot of things that the people are part of the community may have problems and competitive of, but the other part, when we fall, in order to be okay with that.
Okay. Christine?
So, in your scenario, in the scenario that you described, you now have, and the city decided they're not going to say no. Heisey is a big enough area, they're going to let them have their 3 or 4. What do you suggest the money, where do you suggest the money come from for, how do you pay for that police officer that's going to have to be there? If the city deems we need it there, how would that figure into the legislation?
Well, I'm figuring that if the city deems that if you want that event and the police officer needs to be there, then the organization or the neighbors or the community members that are organizing
collects the money?
So,
And who does, where do you deposit that money to?
Yeah, who pays, who's in charge?
well, who is, I guess, who is
Would that be the
sending,
first
who is paying the officer to go there?
That's my question, you know, if we've got an event that's 7 people, and we say, we need an off-duty police officer, where do we get the money for that?
We already do that. We already have situations in which we require an officer, correct? Community officer, an off-duty police has to go. How does that come in and where does it go? We already have that happening.
They arrange that directly through the FOP.
And then they pay the FOP
And
themselves,
they pay the FOP.
so it doesn't involve the city at all. So in the current system that we have,
Correct.
whenever we have an event
Or
that
the officer
requires,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Or the officer directly.
So if they
Okay.
decide,
So, yes.
So they pay.
if they say, too bad, I'm not paying, and I'm having my garage sale. I mean,
That's,
the permit is separate from this. We're not
That's-
asking for money.
What happens when they violate and they
Yeah,
have,
$500 fine,
Yeah.
if they get caught. If they get caught.
but who?
The violation of this ordinance is classified as a misdemeanor.
Each?
Would probably each.
That's for the board person.
Well, that's for the fourth person in this legislation.
No.
But was the violation there, Doug, in the original legislation, correct?
yes,
So the minor misdemeanor was there in the original legislation.
yes, I believe it.
And it's
So it would go to each person who violated, who had their garage sale without their permit would be violated and they would be held accountable.
So Doug, you have permission to rewrite this and.
So basically what we're doing, in my understanding, is we're doing away, we're limiting it to 3, correct? Is that what we're saying? We're limiting it to 3?
We're limiting to the authority of the city to decline an application. What we want to do is allow the city to have the authority to say no when somebody comes in to apply. Whether the department decides that it's 3 or 5 or 10,
All right,
that's a decision that's made by the
so
administration.
the city manager designee will make that determination.
Correct.
But you know, I guess let's step back. Let's say you have 5 people on Skinner that decide to do a garage sale, and they talk to each other, they come up and get their permit. Probably on Skinner, you don't need an officer. It's a pretty long street, it's wide enough for parking. So Skinner gets the pass, they don't have to have anything there. Now we have 5 people in Hudson Park, and it's discriminatory if we make them have it, because you don't know if those 5, if 5 people are gonna cause enough traffic that we're gonna get complaints. When we've already looked at the fact there were only 4 complaints in each year. So, I could see the residents of Highland Park, and they have every right to come back and say, or Liberty Green, or all the other 5 that are on here, you know, the 5 in the subdivisions, to come back and say, you're discriminating against us from the perspective of, we had 5, we didn't block any traffic, but we had to have an officer, and Skinner Avenue did not. And,
That's assuming that they're not blocking any traffic.
correct.
Who's going to control that and make sure they don't?
Correct, so if their calls were because they're blocking driveway, they can block my driveway on Skinner, and I would need the same police protection, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, yeah, police do control the area, so there's a chance they may catch him or may not.
Same with Highland Park. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is a Skinner Avenue could be an event, a North State Street could be an event, Charlotte Street could be an event.
Well, if
you
it's
know.
5 or more, they probably have to pay.
I guess I'm thinking that if you're setting perimeters about stay, you know, like within so many miles of each other, within so many doorways of each other, with so, like, the city has to set a criteria for a fair and equitable criteria about why they would decline a permit. So I'm not even talking about now saying you have to hire an off-duty police officer. I'm talking about the city saying, nope, that's 5 or more. And now, if you consider that an event, and you want it to be an event, and you guys all agree on it, here's the cost of that event to you. because you have to have an off-duty police officer. So that's why, again, I'm trying to separate out what's an event and what's considered an event and what's considered a brand new garage sale that somebody's hosting at their home.
When you talk about Heisen Park, and they have these garage sales, it's not 5, it's like 50, it's like 80,
Correct.
so, that could be a red flag, it's not.
Well, if it's that many and the permit's 10 or 20 bucks, that would cover the cost of the police plus.
Well, my suggestion again is that we have two different things, so that if the community is saying, yes, we're having an event, and we've come together as a neighborhood and agreed upon holding this event, the legislation is different for that group of people that are, if they want an event, I don't think we should say,
No, I agree.
They
with
can't
you.
have an
Yeah,
event.
I agree with you.
let them have the event, but there's a cost associated with that event that they have to foot the bill of, the people who are throwing the event, just like any other events in the city. If you're throwing an event on the square, and we determine that you need an off-duty police officer there, that's your responsibility, and you do that. You have to do that. So I'm not suggesting that we say decline it as much as we give the authority to the city to decline it, but at the same time, allow for events. I'm not saying don't allow for events.
And let me clarify, I mean, you're using the word authority, I think it would be the discretion of the city manager or designee. So
I appreciate that, and I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what Christine is basically saying is, I mean, it's discrimination. If you're gonna say 3 or 4, it needs to be 3 or 4. But, and initially, I think I sent a list of criteria that we would look at to city council, and I don't have that right now, but there was a whole list of criteria that we would look at. Ingress and egress, things that, how wide the streets are, things of that nature. I mean, in making a determination as to whether they need it, how close they are together, whether we determine whether they would need, whether it would be an event, as you say, or is allowable because it's spread out far enough. We don't believe it's going to create problems. Lynn, myself, and Larry were talking earlier today. You may be able to have 20-yard sales if they're spread out in Heisley Park, where it doesn't become an event. I mean, it's the 81 or the 5 grouping on Greenwood that shuts down, or Greenfield that shuts down the street, versus just one here, one there, spread out all over the development. So I think those are the things, I mean, we would take into consideration as far as the discretion in making that determination, if it turns into an event, or if it remains something where they would not be required to hire an off-duty police officer. Does that make sense?
Jim?
Yes.
Sure. Obviously, I'm not for this, but the other part of this is, what if 4 families go in together and bring all their stuff to the house? Is that more sale or is that one garage sale? And the question is, who's going to determine that? The police, the city personnel? Or can we continually ask people to do all of that? And it appears to me that we're asking them to do a whole lot more when it doesn't have to be. If we were creating a administrative nightmare, or if we were putting police in a bad position, I think we're pitting neighbor against neighbor. This is just not good legislation. But when you're saying that you can have 3 people, then the 4th person or 5th person has to pay for police, it's not going to end well. I just don't do it.
Just shoot.
Well, I also look at it, we have something on the books now, but I also look at it from the perspective of why are we redoing legislation for one, as you said, why should the whole city be responsible for paying a $10 fee or $20 fee? And my question, going along your same logic, why are we putting legislation out there for one area? Because that's what we're doing. We're putting two areas. But when you read this, when you look at the statistics, Liberty Green was never a problem. The problem was Highway Park. So by your same argument, to expect the rest of the city to have to pay a fee or live by this when it's just one event or one area, same goes for legislation. Why do we have to write legislation? It's like spot zoning in my mind.
I think
We're gonna
that's it.
spot zone something, let me finish, Laura. We're gonna spot zone something because somebody wants to build something in their yard, and so we've pushed that through. Now, we've never done that, that's terrible to do, but I'm saying, why do we need legislation for one area?
I would suggest that we're not asking for legislation for one area because the legislation would affect any area. So, if there's a group of people in any area in the city coming together to have a set of garage sales in their area, that is an event. It doesn't matter if it's Heisman Park, it doesn't matter if it's the Charlotte area, it doesn't matter if it's Ward 1, you know, Skinner, Sanford, Heights, grouping. You know, we do have neighborhood associations, the people over on Hayter and that street, Bank Street could do the same thing. So I would say that we're not writing legislation for one specific area. I'm saying the issue came up because of events at one or two specific areas. So the problem arose and we were alerted that there was an issue because of those areas, but it wouldn't
There was
pertain.
one issue though, right?
Well, it was issues a number of years in a row, and it seems to have, the problem seems to have escalated. You know, from the start of it, it's escalated, and the homeowners association isn't in charge of the event in their community, so they can't be, you know, you can't use that form of addressing the issue through homeowners associations. But I guess I'm suggesting that it wouldn't be, but it would just define for the community. It is an event. If people are collaborating together to draw people into their community to do anything, that's an event. If a group of neighbors are collaborating together to draw people in, they're holding an event.
Jim?
The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. And we don't get, in 2019, there were only 3 instances where police were needed. And again, if we go down the road that, you know, 4 or 5, people are going to tell garage sales because who's going to, and who's going to hurt the institute, who's going to determine if 3 people go together with that one garage sale free thing. And then going back to, we do is every city needs to know. The people that live over on Madison Avenue, they need for it fall in the winter time on the hill going in and out of the city and over here on Star. So we still, these are residents who need to be a thing of that. But just the way things are, this is what they have to kids. Each kid is one side does fall. And again, I'm against, I'm $10 people. Let's see how far we can go.
Susan, the city's something with $10.
Go back, yeah, Jim, we didn't hear that.
He just wants a fee and see how it goes.
I mean, even in the history,
Yes, sorry.
even when you read the history says that since that, in 2010, we put the legislation together. Since that time, additional development has created a need to modify the ordinance. In recent years, garage, lot sale, porch have created issues within various neighborhoods, specifically Highland Park and Liberty Greens. They've created safety congestions. The city has been required to expend resources to ensure the safety of the residents living in the area. So the task force came up with with these situations. Still, it's 2 areas. I know what you're saying, it's an event, but so far we've not had any, in the last 2 years, there's been nothing anywhere else in the city that has violated or created a situation. Yes, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Just to explain, I mean, I was asked to develop legislation
By the task.
because 2 areas of the community were utilizing police services for an event, or for which it is an event because it was organized by one person, basically, and they use Nextdoor to send out the invitations and have people register for, letting people know what date it's going to be, and then everybody registers. But I was told that because one group is utilizing services that nobody else gets the benefit of, that they should have to pay for those services. It's just like the special events ordinance that we've done recently, where the city has stepped out of some events, but we charge each one of those groups for services that they may need, whether it's putting in electric poles to put up electric boxes, whether it's partying in the park where they need additional police services, they pay for those events. This is my understanding is, because of the fact that this is no different than that, they should have to pay for that event. And that need for additional police services during that event because we get parking calls and things of that nature, or we need to put up cones and no parking along the main street before it happens, or those types of things. Those are things we would charge somebody conducting an event within the city of Painesville. They are not paying those fees, and that's why I was asked to draft legislation. Now, it's entirely up to council, how you want to handle that, but, this is why I just wanted to explain to everybody why this ordinance came up, I guess it's an ordinance, huh? Yes, ordinance came up was for that specific fact, that they were receiving services that no one else in the city is receiving in conducting yard sales, and therefore that group should have to pay for it.
Well, as an administration, can't you make that decision like you were saying? If you get 50 registrations for a garage sale in one high density area, I would consider that. Yeah, it is.
Doug,
Yes.
do you think it's wise in our current ordinance for garage sales to identify the difference between an event and a garage sale? Do you think that when you're looking at the current legislation we have, do we have to spell out for people that an event is, a collaborative effort, and that if it's considered an event by the administration, then they have to follow the event, the special event?
And I guess that's why this was drafted, basically. 3 or more on a street would be, was considered an event, or would be potentially a problem. We would obviously have to evaluate it. That's why we left it to the discretion of the city manager. So that's why in this legislation, you have C stating that 3 or more basically would require the property owner to register, or more than the third person would require the property owner to register, and they would be responsible for paying for the event. But it also leaves under D the discretion of the city manager to determine whether a police officer or whether any additional people are necessary. As I said, in Heisley Park, depending on the location, it may not be an event until there's 20 or 30, or who knows what that number is, depending on where they're located. If they're spread out all over Heisley Park, then it may not be event because you have people going to different areas.
Right.
If it's all on Greenfield, then it ends up creating issues with traffic and some of the things that we look at. So if those criteria that we've established are impacted, then it would require the police officer to be hired for the event. Do you see what
I just don't think that it spells out that in here. It doesn't say that plainly to me. And what I read when I read this is that it concerns me that this third or fourth person is now responsible for the knowledge of who's doing what in their neighborhood, when there might have not been a coordinated effort for this to occur. You know, if I'm gonna have something on Skinner and the administration says to me, hey, well, there's 3 already on Skinner, now I need to run around and figure out who those 3 are, and knock on every door and say, are you planning it? There's a difference when somebody makes a flyer up and puts it indoors and is inviting everybody in the community. The minute they make that flyer and invite other people to participate, they've created an event.
And understand, in that situation, we have the discretion, okay, so administration would have the discretion to say, we've determined that you're the 4th person, we need to evaluate, we have that 12-day period to evaluate whether this is an event, or not an event, but whether you would require police services, yeah, based on the criteria. If we make that determination, then they could, 1, hold the event and pay for the police services. It would be their responsibility as the 4th person. We're saying that 1 through 3 already applied. They're exempt, you see what I'm saying, from paying because they applied first. It's always first, you know, it's on a first come, first served basis. So the 4th person would have to pay if they wanted to do the event. If they say, I'm not paying to have police services, they can offer their event any one of the other weekends or any one of the other days throughout the summer. They don't have to do it that specific day. You see what that's the point. I mean, that they would be, if they're the 4th, you know, it's first 3, if you register and there's no, and what we're saying is the first 3 register, they don't have to pay, you know, they don't have to pay for the event. The 4th one kicks in the fact that, okay, now we have to evaluate it. Is it going to cause an issue based on the criteria? If it's not, they can do it and they don't have to pay the fee. If we determine it does, because they're all 4 located in the same area and it's on a cul-de-sac and it's hard to get out once you get down there, then the 4th person would have to pay, or they would do it a different weekend. Does that make sense? They have that choice. So you have a choice whether you pay or you do it a different weekend.
Pay or play.
What's your?
I find that offensive. I just think that's wrong to make somebody, you have to go and get a police officer for $900, and these other 3 enjoy the same benefit of having their 3, they're having their garage sale, having their traffic cause their situation, but having one person pay. If that stays in the legislation, I don't think I can really feel in my good conscience to approve that. And it doesn't matter, you need 5, you need, nothing, but to me, we are just making it seem we are writing legislation for 2 areas. It's still, I believe that in my heart of hearts, we're writing legislation for 2 areas that cause concern. I think that it's just not, as Jim said earlier, this legislation is going to cause a lot of, this type of legislation could cause people to be upset or angry with it. And to say to someone, you can have it another day. Now, I guess so what happens if they put it out on Nextdoor? This was the real question I had. They put it out on Nextdoor and they say the garage sale is going to be July 1st. And it's now June 5th or 6th. And you have to register by you have 14 days, so you need to register by a certain day. And what happens when people they try to register and it's day 20? Now you've lost your 14 days. Do we tell them no? At that point, is that what because you need 14 days. So in theory, everybody's going to apply for their garage sale permit, and you'll have, if there's going to be 80, you'll have 80 people. Do they apply online? Do they apply in person? And so if it's July 1st, then you have to register by June 16th to get your 14 days. So on June 16th, by June 16th, we get all these registrations. What if somebody comes in and says, oh, I just saw the thing on my next on the thing, and I want to be in the garage stuff because I live in Isaac Park, but it's June 20th. Do we tell them no? Would we tell them no because it's not, they don't have enough 14 days?
Larry, what would you tell them? Yes, no. The answer is no.
And they're still gonna stick their stuff out, they're gonna walk over their neighbors or whatever, and that's fine, I guess, if they put it out. I mean, are we going to then police them and go down and say, okay, we told Christine she can't have this, but I'm betting that she's just gonna blow me off and say, okay, I'm doing it anyway. How are you gonna catch me? Are we gonna police that? Are we writing legislation that we're going to police? Because we hear that all the time from Monica and everybody when we write things. If we can't enforce it, why are we doing it? And are we going to enforce that?
It's a violation of the ordinance, it's an unclassified misdemeanor.
Right.
It's published.
But are we going to send police officers down there to enforce it? You know, we've had other circumstances where we wanted to put legislation in place, and Monica's words back to us were, we can't enforce that. That's not something that we can enforce. I can't remember exactly what legislation it was, but we can't enforce those kind of things. Are we going to enforce this?
And what would be on that person that's organizing the 80 garage sales? Because usually it's one person that's sending out.
So you're pitting neighbor against neighbor.
Who's the charge of organization?
And that's what makes it an event, is that there's an organized effort. I mean,
Right.
that's the difference, Christine. These situations that have created this problem happened because it was an organized event. So I just don't feel that the way the legislation is written clarifies that well enough for the average reader to understand that at some point we're separating out that they need to follow procedures related to event registration when they're making this organized effort to include, and I don't care how far apart they are. If it's an organized effort, it's an event.
Well,
So-
then shouldn't they be responsible?
Yes.
For organizing?
Well, the organizer, and then if the city is saying, yeah, we're not saying that the city can't say, no, they're not gonna say, no, you're not allowed to have an event. We allow events. But this is the standard, when you are having an event, these are the things that have to be in place, and these are the things that you have to be willing to do. And then that's when we're recouping the thing. I just feel like the way it was written, and I understand, and I think we're kind of on the same page where we're trying to tweak out, if somebody's having an event, we want them to be responsible for the costs associated with the event. I think we have the same goal.
I do.
That was the purpose of developing the ordinance.
I just don't think it was developed as well as it could be for that, because it doesn't identify things like that.
Jim?
You know what? At this moment in time, never mind.
Sorry.
Yes.
So take me through that. You just said somebody's organizing it. Somebody's sending out a thing on Nextdoor and they're organizing it in Hyde Park or wherever. They're organizing it. So if that person who's organizing it is number one, they don't have anything to pay, but yet they're the one organizing it.
I'm not agreeing that we should do that.
Okay,
I don't think we should have the first two not. I think that the thing is, the legislation should identify the difference between a garage sale and an event. And if you are a responsible community resident and you are actually hosting an event and organizing an event, you need to follow the criteria for organizing an event. I don't agree with the third person. I don't agree with, I kind of checked what I agreed with and didn't down on my legislation, but I don't.
And just to say, the caveat is, if you make it an event, the organizer will never claim that they are the organizer. I had this last year happen.
Okay.
That when we determined, that it was being sent out, we contacted the individual who other individuals said had sent it out on Nextdoor, and all they stated was, I just sent it out on Nextdoor. I'm not the organizer of the event. I'm just making people aware what day it is.
So then my question about that is that if you were having something like that happen at the park or somewhere else, would you shut it down? Would the police go in and shut it down and say, oh, we don't know who organized it,
Right.
but this is an event and it hasn't been authorized by the city, everybody go home. Shut your doors and go home.
Well, if it's on city property, that's different,
Yeah,
versus.
That's a good point.
They would be required to fill out event, special events permit typically,
Okay.
and tell us who's in charge and how many people are going to be there, and then we determine whether there are additional resources needed.
So can this legislation identify the difference for what is considered an event, a special event, and what the criteria is for that? Can we do that in the same piece of legislation? You know, if there's an organized effort, if it's being advertised to entice other residents to join in, if it's, cannot come up with a criteria that creates and makes it an event, regardless of who, you know, I understand what you're saying. If you can't go back to who organized it, then you can not have an accountable person. But if the legislation identifies the criteria of an event, that it's advertised and it's this and it's that, and then can it also allow for us to close it, shut it
So
down?
we want to have the first person be responsible.
I think they found a way around the legislation.
Oh, yeah, and then each HOA is not involved, which they should be, but it's legally against us. Because that would be that would be the one to go after. Yes.
If I may talk for a minute. I apologize. Larry Armstrong.
Oh, there it is.
No, wait. Just real quick, that's, I don't think we're gonna come up with legislation that everyone's gonna feel great about covering the entire city.
We're creating an administrative and enforcement right here, whether it's food, or food, actually having a garage sale on a cul-de-sac, when there's 5 houses and 3 houses go together into one, you know, not all of a sudden we're investigating. That is not a story I want to be in the news here. Who's investigating in Painesville, but who's really having a garage sale this weekend? It's not good legislation in my mind.
All right. Yes. Thank you.
Can we turn that so they can see there?
They can see them through my computer.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be difficult to come up with something that everybody feels good about for the entire city. I think, you know, the fee thing, I think will be an issue as far as collecting fees in-house and dealing with them that way. The other issue is if the city's involved and the city's gonna pay what we wanna call an off-duty officer, well, now they're getting paid through the city, so they're gonna be based as overtime hours, not side job hours, because now they're getting paid through the city. Versus something like Party in the Park is an organized event and paid for by someone who's contracting site work, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
And I do agree with you that, yeah, side job fees go up X amount of years or overtime, that fee can change. The cost of dealing with it in-house, that can change as well. For the $10 or $20 to have 191 people during the peak summertime of permits come in through the zoning and try to pay for the $10 or $20 is probably going to be an additional drain on manpower and resources. I don't disagree there. As far as, you know, where now we get a permit application, either hand it to us, we process it, mail it back, or they can do it via email. We don't have to collect that payment, run it through finance, and do all those extra steps, because there's no payment required. That's what we sent these maps about, just as another topic of discussion, was coming up with a scenario of allowing X per street. And then it comes back to the city manager, the designee, just saying no. If we want to say it's 3 per street for the entire city, or 5 per street for the entire city, whatever number we think we're going to be comfortable with, that's one way to approach it. The other thing is, when we want to talk about it being a Heisley Park issue or a more densely populated area issue, it is. The houses are closer together, lots are narrower, the streets are narrower, so parking becomes an issue quicker. Greenfield seems to be a good example we always use because that's the only entrance and exit. So if we say 3 per street, if there are 3 next to each other, or 3 down the street, whether it's Skinner Avenue and there's 3 per street, 4th one is none. We don't have to collect fees, we don't have to manage events, we don't have to do all these things. It would just be a collective, you know, X per street for the entire city, and then no after that. That's one approach that's simplistic to manage. The other is designated by zone. If it's R1, maybe it's allowed X per street. If it's R160 or R2, we know it's densely populated. with smaller roads and smaller lots, maybe that number per street is smaller. And that's what some of those maps were referencing that were on Exhibit F. So that you come up with something that might, you know, yeah, it might be different per zoning classification, but it might be simpler to manage and more fair for the residents in those areas.
And that's what we were talking, I mean, in Heisley, if you look at R160 or R2 zoning, if you look at 5, 7, and 10%, based on the number of houses in Heisley, it would be 25, 35, or 50. So that would, I mean, that would dictate how many events or how many yard sales could actually be held down there based on the percentage, given that particular zoning. And that's what you're getting at.
Yes.
Yes, there's.
So if I look at this, under scenario A, there's 5 per street and 5 per cul-de-sac. I'm on the Heisley Park subdivision.
Good.
Allowable sales at 80. If we were to put that in place and we use Greenfield Greenfield is a huge long street.
Agreed.
So if we use Greenfield as an example, once we hit 5, whether it's 5 in the first, as you make that right-hand turn, left-hand turn, if you've got 5 right there, that's it. If they've got 5 and they're going all the way down towards past the cattails and all the rest of that, if they go all the way down there, it's still 5, right? I mean, I like this better because I think this says, if you're willing to say no after 5, and because what can happen over there is, the person on Greenfield will go over to their neighbor on Birchwood and say, hey, can I drag my stuff over here? You know, I mean, they'll consent it down. But do you think, back to my original question, Mary, do you think 5 per street in that first lot of Greenfield is too much?
If they were the first 5 right next to that intersection, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, the other thing is that scenario A1, you see the total sales allowed, that's 5 per street, 3 per cul-de-sac. We can even simplify that to, doesn't matter if it's cul-de-sac or street, it's still one number if you want to calculate it. But that's total sales 80. I wouldn't even allow, and that's where I say it's based on zoning, 80 and 90 is what we have now, which is causing a problem.
Right.
So actually somewhere like this Heisley Park subdivision, which is R2, you'd almost want a different number than you would want for East Erie or Skinner or Cedarbrook.
But if they're advertising a community sale, that's an event.
And I think it comes back to one person or one collective group of people wanting to manage that and run it as an event has started to go by the wayside and will probably not officially happen unless someone in the community takes charge to do that.
So Lori, do you feel this is, I mean, you asked initially, why couldn't we just say no? I think looking at these scenarios, it gives the ability to say, oh, you're at Greenfield, you're number 6. No, I think.
And it's back to the.
I guess I feel like the community should be allowed to have an event. I don't feel like we should not allow the community to throw an event if that's what they want to do. And so that would limit them and tell them that even if you were willing to pay for an off-duty police officer and phones and signs, I mean, even if you were willing to do that,
Maybe they need to have some charge to have an event.
That's what I'm thinking.
Well,
and that's what I'm thinking is if we could draw out what an event is and looks like in the legislation where it lists the things, if it's advertised, if it's this, if it's that, there has to be somebody in charge. You know, I don't mind referring back to this and saying no unless they want to register it as an event.
That's exactly where I was going with
And I don't think that's a bad idea.
That's-
I don't think that's-
I like that too.
That's a good idea.
So you got it, Doug? Friday the
I think
13th.
the UFO was landed.
Doug, I think you
Jason
need to mute.
is on this one.
It's on mute.
I think we're being abducted.
An event.
hit the 5 per street, it's done. You've hit the 5 per street, we're not gonna let you go any further. But if there is something in here in lieu of, if your neighborhood association, or not your HOA, but if your neighborhood wants to have it, here's the criteria that you must do to organize it as a community event. Otherwise, you're stuck with 5 per street, 3 per cul-de-sac, or whatever scenario. I mean, which scenario do you like? Highland Park's gonna, in our statistics, Highland Park is the one that has the most concerns. So are you looking at scenario A2 would be the better way to go? Because those cul-de-sacs are tiny down in here.
Well,
What are you looking at?
the issue with, like I said, the total sales in A1, 80, that's where we're at currently with the problems. And I've been down there some of the times when these events have gone on in past years, working the road. If you go into the complex, depending on where you're at, you're not getting out for a half hour. And if a police officer's in there in an emergency, you're probably driving through front yards, because traffic has nowhere to go. So, if it were to me, that's where I said some of the zoning based, like R1 might be 5 per street or 3 per cul-de-sac, but something like R2 or R160 might need to be 3 and 2. Something like that, because it is so much more dense. There's a quick count, about 20 roads here in Isley Park. And if you did, let's say an average of 4 per street, that puts us right at 80, which is the problem number. So it has to be something lower or half, or, some kind of number that would be reducing the amount. And like you said, it would be if 40 garage sales or 25 garage sales happen this weekend, well, 25 more can happen next weekend.
Right.
There's all summer, unless, like you said, someone's gonna host it and sponsor the event and hire off duty and do that, then that can be language we can work on.
Katie? Katie?
So I guess my question would be, we talked, I'm hearing everybody, but I heard something about 5 per street. And how do we separate between 5 on Eastwood versus 5 on Liberty? And I'm wondering, if this might be a good time to, as a city, define neighborhoods, and maybe say within the defined neighborhoods, there's X allowable.
And Katie, you should have received something. Katie, you should have received something in the council packet that basically did that. That's what Lynn and Larry did, was break it down into 5 different areas, more or less, correct?
Based on zoning.
Based on zoning. So they broke it down into 5 areas based on zoning.
Oh, sorry, that was the one I couldn't get over earlier, okay.
Okay, and what they're talking about is they gave different scenarios based on a per street, per cul-de-sac, or based on the zoning. So if it's R1 or R160 or R2, then you could do a percentage of that as well. So the percentage we talked about, if you do 5 per street and 5 per cul-de-sac in Isley, it's 80. We know that 80 is a problem because that's when it's basically, it takes you half an hour to get in and out. So the issue is, okay, if you want to do it, just put a specific number on a street. What is that number? Or you can do it as a percentage. So if you're looking as a percentage in those areas, if you say 7% because there's 501 houses, that would allow 35 yard sales. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
It does make sense, but I guess I'm concerned about 45 yard sales in Isley. Like, I'm trying to imagine where they are and whether or not they would still be.
Well, that's what Larry said as well. You could limit it to say, okay, 3 per street, a total of 7%. That way it would allow the first 3 people on every street to apply up to 35. Once you hit 35, then they say no.
Okay, and then would we also, I think I heard, I'm gonna just confirm, we would also then have a organized garage sale piece that would address the cost of the fees, is that correct? So we would do general garage sales and then address organized garage sales.
This would address the organized garage sales. That's basically what you're proposing, correct?
Yeah, this was separate from an organized event. I think what some council was talking about was, like, if section A is this, section B is 80 garage sales, hiring off-duty police officers and running it as one community event.
And I'm suggesting that we shouldn't restrict residents and say they're not allowed to have a community event, and we should allow them to do that if they want to pay for the resources associated with an event.
So the answer is yes, the 2. So it would go. So it would be a combination of, yes, they can do an event, which may be more than what's allowed, 3 per street and 7% of the total overall development. But then if they wanted to do an event, they could organize an event, and then they would be responsible for hiring the off-duty police officer.
And signage and anything.
And the criteria, Lori mentioned that there would be specific criteria that they would have to agree to, right? Right, and so you might have 1 organizer, or you might have 3 organizers, but, of people that are working on this, but you have to have someone in charge. is what I'm
Right, and
saying.
they have to register that they're in charge, and they have to, you know, that whatever goes with, I mean, you probably have a lot of that in your special events already, and then you add in anything that we think deems directly related to the garage sale.
Right. We have 3 letters that were written that wanted to be addressed, so.
I think what we're doing right now is just addressing the criteria, because we still don't have legislation proposed. So the letters, I mean, I thought we were gonna save to read a council meeting once we untable the legislation. But at this point, we don't have any,
We're not gonna vote on it.
Well, do we read resident letters or allow for resident
Yeah,
comments at our
work
work sessions? I
work
don't think
sessions,
so.
we usually don't, we save it, that's what I'm saying, for council meetings. And based on what I'm hearing from council, well, this legislation may change substantially, so those comments may not be valid.
I can see that, I mean, we never would,
Yeah.
if somebody was sitting in the audience, we could give them permission to speak if we wanted to, but we don't normally do
Yes.
that.
We'll
So,
let Maureen, well, she can read that at the opening of the council meeting.
are we gonna untable it? No, we're not untabling it tonight.
Once it's untabled though, right?
We're gonna leave it tabled, and then when you come back with legislation in our July meeting, that's when this is gonna hit, that's gonna be tough.
And that was a discussion that Monica had at the last city council meeting, that we would hold the letters until we untabled the legislation, and then we would read it at that time.
And that's fine. But
In the meantime, do we all have those letters? I mean, there's no reason we.
they've been all sent to us.
There are 3 emails that I sent to Valerie's email.
We can just
So,
have it forward.
So,
they're in her
And I
email.
I guess for clarification purposes, does council want to set, I haven't heard, a recommendation for us to come back and develop the legislation based on a certain number or percentage within a neighborhood.
I think
We here do, but I'm not sure what we've got with
Yeah.
our TV viewers.
Nick? Nick?
I guess I heard a lot. What are the options?
The options are setting a specific number based upon the scenarios provided. You have the 5, really it's up to council. It can be 5, 4, 3, 2, or 1 on a street. You see how that affects based on the maps. And Nick, you should have received something in your packet today. And then the other one is a percentage. So based upon the number of houses within a particular area, it would be based on 5%, 7%, or 10% is the numbers that were provided, but really, it can be whatever council, whatever council chooses.
What's your thoughts?
Coming into this, I wasn't really opposed to, charging everybody what I want to have. You want to actually a fee, and that's that. Pays for whatever we're doing here. I agree with Wim that I don't want to make this hard on administration. I agree with Christine, I don't want to limit something for campers. And I don't want to make this hard on anybody. So if we can find a way to find an event for it is that, I'd like to do that. And if not, I think we should make it even possible and just make everybody pay. Can you hear me? Did you hear that?
Yeah, we heard you.
Okay.
Thank you. Jim?
I would no on both of those proposals. I'm more inclined the 10 or 20 mile fee for everybody, and charge per year to do that.
10 or 20.
The fee, Jim's talking, you're talking the fee, right, Jim?
Yeah.
The fee. Katie?
Exactly.
Okay, I can't see that as a wall, and I didn't have an opportunity to read through all the exhibits over this meeting.
All right. Well, we're not gonna make any motions tonight. So we can still get a hold of Doug and get him input.
And Katie.
And Katie?
Yeah, thanks, Christine, for looking out. So for me, my preference is actually kind of I guess a hybrid. I really like the idea of having language for events, for a specific kind of event, and allowing that, and at that point, that would also kick in. And then having a percentage of the houses in that area being the day-to-day kind of garage sale. I think I've heard we don't want to limit people's ability to do this. We don't want to prohibit them from doing it. We want to put this simple. We can make this easy. So I think by putting it that way, most of the functions remain internal, not like that for the yard sales. And it's fairly black and white that they're going to be doing a community garage sale. There is no cost associated with police having a presence. So I don't know what everybody else thinks, but I would like to see language with run-of-the-mill hospitals and community garage sales opening.
That's basically what we just discussed here.
Right, and it's,
Yes.
so we're going back to, if we chose, well, I'm looking at the Heisman subdivision. If we chose scenario A3, which was 58, which was 8 more than their smallest one in 2018. And it was, 4 per street, 4 per cul-de-sac, or 2 per cul-de-sac. Chances are slim that we would need police officers, off-duty police officers there. Is that what this description is for? Because 80 we did have, when we got it at 80 we had to have it, but are you anticipating that scenario A3 would give us the ability to not necessarily have to have a police presence?
Yeah, the hopes by limiting per street broadens the scope of where the sales are.
Okay.
Now, Greenfield, probably with 20 or 30 garage sales in there, will still be a lot more congested than it is without that.
Right.
So I don't know that there's a magic number that I'll say won't give us a problem, but, going down towards that scenario versus what it is now lessens the chance that there's a problem.
And we would say no. I mean, once there's 4 on Greenfield, the answer is no.
Unless they want
to move to. And then to go to Lori's description, we look to our special events legislation that we have. And I would think that you could just refer that to special. I don't know if you need to put it in here, but like you said, there's something in special events that says you need to have this. So it would be referred to section 1162 of special events to get if you choose to do it that way rather than write it in the garage sale legislation, I think. But, so that's kind of, I mean, I feel that's a good way to go.
Right.
I feel that's a great.
Tom?
Yeah, I do too.
I do too.
So we got 4. And then you'll
I
bring
thought
up,
it was Katie, I think. you
and
said.
Katie was 2.
I think the question came up though, is that okay, Steve?
Yes.
Which of these scenarios, I think Doug, you were saying we could do 3, we could do 5, we could do based on a percentage, and what direction does council want to go in? I don't think that question has been answered yet for
Yeah,
you.
that's what I'm looking for,
Okay,
direction.
so
I think
my,
I understand the scenarios.
my opinion is the lower the number, the better, because then it gives the opportunity still for the event to be registered, and then I think we want to err on the side of safety, especially for our, safety forces having to get back there, like ambulances or whatever, or fire trucks, yeah. So for me, I want to go on the lower side. If we learn that, hey, we could do a little bit better, and we can always tweak that up at some point down the road with an amendment, but I want to stay low to start.
I agree.
with that.
I'm good with that too. And we have Larry or whoever the designees, we wouldn't even necessarily need to tweak it if the designee decides we're okay. Because they're looking at the overall big picture. And the designee has the right to make that decision to say, you know what, we only have 3 on Greenfield, maybe we could do, that's discretion. That's where the discretion comes in.
Unless it's in legislation, then there would be no room for
Right.
discretion. So I think we want it in legislation.
So I'm gonna use,
I think.
Okay.
if council's okay with this, I'm gonna use 3 per street, 2 per cul-de-sac, with a maximum of 5%, which would limit it to 25 in Bosley Park. If they wanted to do an event, then anything over that, they would, conform to
Good.
Christine.
I thought this was a scenario A or B. I didn't think we were combining the scenarios.
I thought that's what I heard for a total max.
If we don't want to combine scenarios, it doesn't matter to me. The hard part with it, it's possible, but if you combine all the scenarios, like Katie was saying, you almost have to define what the neighborhood groups are. Because if you look at these other maps, there's Liberty Greens and such on there, where if you make a percentage, that's different for every neighborhood.
Yeah.
Versus if we say it's a street,
So 5.
or a zoning classification and a street. Like if you're R2, it's 3 and 2, but if you're R1, maybe it's 5 and 3.
Bigger.
Because your roads are bigger, your roads are longer.
I guess my whole concern was that that third person having to pay $900. With these scenarios, that's gone. I'm the happy camper. Whatever number you choose is fine.
Because if you get back to 3 per street, just to give you a scenario, if you get back to 3 per street and there's 20 streets in Isaac, that means you can have 60 people have a yard sale. Well, there's cul-de-sacs, so probably around 54. Katie?
And what would
No,
that?
I was saying. So when we think the street though, we mean in those neighborhoods, those defined neighborhoods, because I bring up Liberty Street again. 3 garage sales Liberty Street is a blend.
I guess, Katie, I'm thinking on Liberty Street, you don't even have on-street parking. So having 3 on Liberty Street could be a problem. More than 3 on Liberty
They're
Street.
gonna have to
Even
park
though the
somewhere
street
else.
is big and long,
Park somewhere else.
they have to find a place to park. So, and they can't park in the street, and there may not be room in the driveway, and then people are backing out of the driveway. So even on a long street like Liberty or Menor Avenue, it's problematic to have more than 3.
Rick Jackson Street.
Yeah.
There's no parking.
Well, but if I have 2 garage sales by the hospital and 1 garage sale by Charlotte, that's my 2 garage sales. Both are far enough apart, they won't bump each other.
I
You
guess
see what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about mass, we're talking about people in masses, groups. And so if we're either gonna do neighborhood approach, or if we're doing the street approach, then we have some pretty long streets that aren't gonna have prices. If we have 3 garage sales on the
Can the administration make a decision on that?
yeah.
Also, just to figure
I mean, I could live with 70% in Heisman Park, because that would get 35, but 5% only gives them 25. They've never had one that low, but
And maybe you just use the percentage and define neighborhoods with
Right.
associations and, you know what I mean?
and then they give it, yeah, and they have the ability.
That's exactly what I'm saying, Lori.
Yeah, I hear you. So, but not every place in the city has a defined neighborhood. And so that's my concern. Now, I'm for neighborhood associations, so I think,
So are you saying in a defined neighborhood like Heisman Park, just do a percentage?
well, I'm just saying,
Because I'm thinking, if you do 5%, which is 25, and you have 25 people on Greenfield that sign up, you got a big problem.
no, I think what Doug mentioned was kind of a hybrid, like 3 on each street and no more than a percentage, correct? 5%. So he's saying the two criteria, the 3 on each street and no more than 5% in the community.
And then you still leave it to the discretion of the city manager or designee to decide whether they can hold additional ones on the street.
Okay.
I'm good with that, bring that back.
Everybody else have their hands up, I see none. Can I get a motion to adjourn from our public meeting?
So moved.
Second?
I need a roll call.
Mrs. Shu,
Sure.
Mr. Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Mrs. Donato.
Yes.
Mrs. Jenkins,
Yes.
Mr. Augustine,
Yes.
Mr. Coder,
What are we moving on?
Now,